Welcome to the Future of Education podcast with your host, Dr. Galen DeHay.
Let's face it, colleges and universities must be innovative and might have to start thinking differently if they're going to overcome the challenges facing post-secondary education. I'm Galen DeHay, president of Tri-County Technical College, and this is The Future of Education, a podcast where I discuss the issues and opportunities in higher education with some of the brightest minds running campuses today. Subscribe to The Future of Education on Apple Podcasts or wherever you like to listen.
This podcast is brought to you by Tri-County Technical College, a public 2-year community college located in upstate South Carolina. The college's mission is to provide students with an exceptional and affordable learning experience that improves their quality of life. Tri-County also advances economic development in the region by preparing a highly skilled workforce. Also brought to you by the Higher Education Studio of McMillan Pazin Smith Architecture, a trusted college and university partner for master planning, architecture, and interior design services for academic, athletic, and student life facilities. We design environments that advance culture, create community, and enhance the campus experience.
The demographics of our communities are shifting, with the Hispanic populations among the fastest growing across the nation. As we emerge from the global pandemic, we are seeing some disturbing trends in who is attending college and notably who is not. Today, we're going to talk about the role of community colleges in providing access and success for diverse communities. With us today is Dr. Maria Harper-Marinick. Dr. Harper-Marinick is a national leader in higher education and a strong advocate for access and opportunity, equity, and student success. She served the Maricopa Community College District, including as Chancellor for the system. She is a senior fellow for the College Excellence Program at the Aspen Institute and a guided pathways coach for the Texas Success Center. Dr. Harper-Marinick was featured in Diverse Issues in Higher Education magazine as one of 25 women who have made a difference in the world by tackling some of higher education's toughest challenges and exhibiting extraordinary leadership skills. Dr. Harper-Marinick is originally from the Dominican Republic and came to the USA in 1982 as a Fulbright scholar to complete graduate work at Arizona State University. As a teacher and a mentor to many, and especially to women, she has authored scholarly articles and chapters. Welcome, Maria.
Always a pleasure to be with you.
We have a lot to talk about, so I'm going to jump right in. In your vast experience as a community college leader and in working with colleges across the country, in what ways have you seen communities changing?
That's a very good question. And probably answers today are different from answers pre-pandemic, when communities were changing in a different way than what we see today. And you mentioned some of that in your opening remarks. What we know is that access to higher education, which we know is critical for people to develop talent and have access to opportunities that lead to the economic prosperity of all of our communities, people need to have the ability to afford an education, to afford attending colleges. So post-pandemic, what we know has happened is that enrollment at community colleges has decreased in some communities quite significantly. I've heard numbers like 20% and 30%, and in some cases even 40%. And immediately my thought is, so who's in and who has been left out? Who are the individuals that are not coming to colleges? So as the colleges struggle with the challenge of enrollment, is doing so with the lens of equity, understanding who are the people in their communities that actually, for many reasons that we can probably will talk about, people are not coming to the colleges right now. It is impacting, and we know that African-American, Black students, and also Latina students. Primary challenge right now in the changes is as the communities become more diverse, the enrollment in the colleges currently may not be matching that diversity that is happening in the communities those colleges are designed and charged with serving.
So you've gotten into some of these challenges. Let's unpack a few of those a little bit. Let's talk a little bit about the enrollment challenges that community colleges, but also nationally, four-year colleges are even facing, with a new National Student Clearinghouse report just coming out that enrollment has declined again nationally. Other than the cost barrier, what are the other barriers that you're seeing get in the way of individuals who really need access to our colleges to be able to enroll?
So we talk about affordability, and that's another word that needs some unpacking, because many times people think when college is not affordable is because someone cannot pay tuition or someone cannot pay tuition and fees. And what we understand, which is particularly important for community college students, is that the cost of tuition is only one of the factors that impacts affordability. For many students is the flexibility of taking fewer courses because they have multiple jobs. It is the flexibility of taking courses in the evening because you're working all day long. It is the lack of access to transportation. We like to say community colleges are everywhere in our nation, and that is the case in many places, not necessarily the case in some rural communities, but still people need the vehicles or ways to get to those institutions. So transportation is an important factor. We've heard from, especially from mothers, single mothers, that childcare is also a big factor. In many cases, not only lack of access to childcare facilities, but also childcare in most places is not free. So you have to be able to afford childcare. And also there are other aspects of going to college that it's not just tuition and fees. You have to pay for books, for example. And as we know well, because we have the data to show that books are extremely expensive. Some colleges have taken measures around lowering the cost for textbooks, but that's not happened universally everywhere. So the other parts of an individual, so students are people, and attending college and paying tuition to attend college is only one component of being a person, and all of the things that come into play to allow you the opportunity to attend college. Many are taking care of family, and either you have children at home, or many people are taking care of their parents. So there are so many other factors in the lives of the students that we need to be thinking about, because that is keeping students from attending. So when I think of affordability, I don't keep it at the cost of tuition and fees. There are all these other factors. We also know that, unfortunately, due to economic depression in many communities, that many of the students at community colleges are homeless. They have housing insecurity. They have food insecurity. So I think what has shifted from, I've been thinking about the days when I started teaching many years ago, is that we used to think of the student as just simple that, that's a student, you're here to learn, and that's what we worry about the schedule, about the support services. Now we need to think of the students as whole people. And for many of them, and you hear that, if we reach out to students, that's what you hear, what's keeping me out. Even if you gave me a scholarship, I still have other needs that are not being met. And to me, those are the biggest challenges that the colleges face, because it's not the mission of the colleges necessarily to serve all of the needs that the students, individuals have, so that they can become students at the colleges.
So let's talk a little bit about that. This notion of should community colleges expand their mission, or in what ways do we help students, the whole student, meet those needs so that they can not just gain access, but also be successful? What do you see as the role of community colleges in helping to adapt to those challenges?
I think we have an obligation, and it's a philosophical position, and I'm sure there are people that will not agree with me, but that became very clear to me when I was a chancellor in Arizona, that it did not matter if we had all of the right what we call effective practices or best practices, and some of the programs that were specifically designed for first generation students, in many cases students of color, that, coaching, success coaches, scholarships, paying for techs and all of the things that I have just mentioned, is that if the students are, as students basically would say to us, which was very, very enlightening to me, if I'm hungry and I don't know, I haven't eaten, I don't know when the next meal is coming, I can't engage in the learning. So we do know that there is a connection between having your basic needs met and your ability to engage in deep learning. So I don't know that there's a choice anymore. I think the choice becomes, how do you serve the students if the institution is not set up, doesn't have the resources to do that? In my case, even if we had the resources, we were not able to provide many of those services to the students because it was considered gift of public resources. So that's why reaching to partners in the community. So no one can say, well, it's the college, is the responsibility of an institution alone. It is a responsibility of the community. The colleges are in the community, so reaching out to others, if those partners exist in your community, food banks and United Way, and there's just so many organizations that are ready and willing if you ask. So thinking about the institution in the same way that I'm speaking about thinking of the students as the whole person, the institutions are part of an ecosystem and a community. So if not the college, how do you provide access and information to those students if you really want students to stay engaged and learn? That's the goal that we have at the colleges. So I don't know that, I believe that that's not a choice anymore. Again, in my mind, the choice is, where do you find the options and where do you find the solutions, so that is not just the responsibility of the college.
I think this is an interesting way of thinking about it as an ecosystem. And as we think about community college leaders and the mission of a community college, of being a college of their community, challenging leaders to think a little bit differently about how those resources are provided for. Do you have any examples of where you've seen this work well, where community colleges may have partnered with some agencies to be able to expand those resources?
Well, a clear example is the system that I led, that the partnerships with any agency or nonprofit organization in the greater Phoenix area that could provide to the students access to transportation and food and housing and all of the basic needs, again, from the view of who in the community is ready to do so in partnership with the college, became important. And I'm sure no one said, no, we can't do that. Most people say, that's our mission to do that. We'll figure out how to do it with you. And one of the ones that I was most proud of was a partnership with the Department of Economic Security in Phoenix, where they were willing to actually deploy their staff to the colleges as almost like a satellite of their offices, so that the transportation challenges were removed from having access to that information or receiving your food stamps or whatever the needs are. So that worked well. There are other institutions that have done similar things. Now, the challenge is, which I hear clearly from some institutions, that's fine if you are in a fairly urban place, or if it's close to a city, or if you happen to be in a rural community that has access to that. But there are many rural communities where it's not as simple as saying, well, you can go and establish a partnership when there's no one there to establish a partnership with. So there are models that work. I think a challenge remains then, how do we provide those same opportunities to those colleges that are serving in our rural communities? But there are colleges, that have the one-stop centers that have gone beyond the creation of pantries, for example. Many colleges have that, but we all understand that's not enough. It's important, but it's not sufficient. So many have looked at what else, but invariably those are colleges that have established very strong, mutually beneficial partnerships. There are probably every state you can find examples of that. And, the movement of Real College, which is also, raising the awareness of that. there are many colleges in the state of Texas that have adopted that as a priority, and even in the work on guided pathways, for example, as you mentioned, I am a coach in the state of Texas, is the how to serve the basic needs of the students has become an element of the work within guided pathways, because people understand you can have wonderful pathways, but if the students can't engage, if they're not ready, if they have to step out because they don't have those basic needs met, then the work is not going to be as meaningful. So it's not even an element on the side. Is when convenings are happening about student success and post-completion outcomes and equity, the conversations around how else can we meet the needs of the students, the basic needs of the students, not necessarily the curricular needs of the students. Those are conversations that are integral to the work. So there are many examples, but again, they require thinking about who in the community is ready to do the work with us.
So we're seeing a disturbing trend that fewer students of color are choosing to attend college. Why are people choosing not to attend?
I think it's first connected to affordability, and affordability in the manner that I defined affordability, which is beyond just the cost of tuition. Even though we talk about post-pandemic, I'm not sure that there is a post-pandemic yet. So there are still individuals who haven't recovered economically from the impact of what changes may have occurred because of the pandemic. There are individuals that may still need to take care of their families and work 2 or 3 jobs. So some of the conditions that existed before that impacted some students still exist, and perhaps in some cases got worse, and that's impacting individuals greatly today. So I think that's a part of it. Interestingly enough, some of the data that I have seen is for the students of color who are engaged and enrolled, that actually their persistent rates are higher, and in some communities, even the completion rates are higher. But I have yet to speak to anyone who's not concerned about what is happening to our Latino, African-American students, primarily males. I've been in many conversations lately where the focus is becoming the males, because there's still, 56, 60% of the students of color are women of color, and who are doing pretty well. So I'm not sure that anyone has the answer to what the issue is. I think the data indicate that we need to pay attention to that, and people should be asking questions of that data. Why is that the case? And reaching out to the communities to find out what are some of the reasons, especially connecting with churches or connecting with social service agencies or connecting with those that have maybe in some cases more direct access and the trust of those communities to get a better sense of what is happening and how do we change the narrative. In some cases, I have heard that if there is enough flexibility with online opportunities for learning, that some are choosing that. One college president said it in a way that really made me think about it. He said, not because they like it or want it, but because they need it for now. But again, if you are in a household where there is maybe one computer and you have multiple people that need to use it, you don't have the bandwidth, you don't have the access to data and sophisticated Wi-Fi, then it doesn't matter if you have the technology. That is part of affordability impacting your access to education. So I think the reasons are probably complex. The reality, the fact is that it is happening. And I think we have a responsibility to find out, investigate, ask questions, engage in the community, and find different ways to bring people back into the institutions, not relying on the same old traditional modes of recruitment and, we put a banner and we hope people see it. Or I think the colleges need to be more creative and have intentionally designed strategies to reach into the community and find out in which ways you re-engage those individuals, because the need for talent hasn't gone away because there was a pandemic. There are so many jobs available, and the fact that if you do not have the credentials for those jobs, you are left out of those opportunities. That hasn't changed. So what do we need to do as institutions that are created to provide access to opportunity for all people in the community? What do you do to re-engage those who feel left out and understand the reasons for that? Some of it will be economic, and probably not all of it will be.
You keep bringing up this notion of partnerships, and I don't want the listeners to miss this really important point. I think in the past, community colleges have adopted this mode of we need to be everything to all and do it all ourselves, where in this new world that we're living in, it's really important and more important than ever to engage in partnerships, to really even understand what the barriers are so that we're not assuming what barriers may exist. And then engaging these partners really does increase our capacity to do this work. So I'm so glad you mentioned that.
Those days of all things to all people, first of all, no one has the resources to do that or the institutional capacity to do that. Secondly, the other entities in your community, they want to be part of solutions. They want to be, and some of them are much closer to the needs in the community than the colleges are. So I just don't see that it's an option anymore. I just think that if you really, really believe you are approaching this work to bring prosperity to your communities, you have to work with the community, not sit outside and do things for the community or to the community. You have to work with the community, hence the need for partnerships and collaborations. And I have not met an agency in my life, in my work, that has said, yeah, we do that, but we don't want to work with you. I haven't heard that. So I'm sure they exist somewhere, but I think it's just not waiting for people to come and offer the opportunity. It's just the colleges have to take the initiative, which is what I learned, to reach out and say, we have this need. And the reaction I got usually was, I didn't know, let's make it work. And in a matter of weeks, we had amazing things in place simply because we asked.
You've already started to give me some hope and some solutions for the future, but what gives you hope in the midst of all of these challenges that you've talked about?
Oh, I'm a hopeful person. I always see hope. I think one is we have great institutions, and we have a model of institution called community colleges that's pretty unique to the United States and has worked well for our nation. And to me, it's important to remind ourselves of why the colleges were created in the first place. So we have great institutions. We also have amazing leaders. I know so many people who are leading colleges, like people like yourself, who are committed, who understand the need to provide opportunities for all people in the community, who have the passion for the work, and who are making choices, including a choice to be consciously brave to do the work. It's not easy work, but the work has to get done, and the colleges need to remain vibrant opportunity, access to the community. So what gives me hope is that there are great, amazing human beings involved in this work, and leadership at all levels in the institution. That gives me hope. Also gives me hope when I still hear people say community colleges are so critical to this nation. They're so critical. They're a key player in economic development. That belief hasn't gone away. So it gives me hope that even with all the challenges that we're talking about, the support for community colleges, the charge to community colleges, and then people who are choosing to do the work and lead in community colleges, I have to be hopeful. I have to be hopeful because so many students are grateful for the colleges and what the colleges do. So even though we have spoken about declining enrollment, it's not that there's no one at the colleges. And even those who may have stepped out because conditions of life are keeping them from participating right now will tell you how critical the colleges are we hear those stories all the time. So to me, the work we do is hopeful work. And we have great people who understand what needs to happen and how these colleges need to remain open as viable options for students. And that's what energizes me, that we have this great model of higher education in our nation with the right people choosing to do the work and lead. To me, that's hopeful.
So let's talk a little bit about belonging, sense of belonging. Some researchers are saying that one of the reasons students are not attending community college is they don't feel they belong. What can community colleges do to improve students' sense of belonging?
Yeah, that's an interesting question, because we hear that. And even before there was a national narrative around belonging, there's two things I have heard when participating in focus groups or any form of student voices opportunities. That two things that people have said, students tend to say, it doesn't matter where, it doesn't matter the state, it doesn't matter who the students are in the room. Students, if you ask, what's one thing about this college that you value, that keeps you coming, that you feel so important, and the word care invariably has come up. Someone cares. I feel that someone cares. And I always think of that, Galen, because I'm thinking that doesn't actually take a lot of money. Because if you ask the students, what do you mean by that? And they give you examples, so many times it's just, humanity reaching out to humanity, in some cases as simple as people are smiling, people are welcoming, I feel welcomed when I'm here. When something has happened, someone took the time to hold my hand and, basically walked me to the right place. I haven't heard the students talk about, some sophisticated system that you have to go and buy. It's usually just the human touch to the work. People helping people is important. So the word care comes up. And the other one is feeling safe. Students want to be in an environment, not only that they're physically safe, but also they feel safe to come as who they are, with all their identities present, and that in environments where that's not threatened or is not a threat either. So caring and feeling safe are important, and the sense of belonging. So it's important for institutions to then think, how do you take belonging and translate that to practices or spaces or behaviors? It's easy to say, oh, there's a sense of belonging, and it's easy to say, well, we'll go around and make people feel good. Well, if that's not part of the culture of the institution, that ain't gonna work. So I think for colleges to understand that it's not just the word of the day, is that if you really take the time to talk to students, you will understand how important it is that they feel welcomed, they feel safe, and they feel people care that I show up, people care when I don't show up. How do you translate that to the work? And there are some institutions that are known for doing that work well. I mean, the institution that always comes to mind is Amarillo College in Texas, because the sense of belonging and the way they say it is they love all their students. They have actually changed the culture of that institution around that notion that we need to feel safe. The other institutions where developing a sense of belonging and identity and community is critical to their mission are all the tribal colleges. And I think we can learn from them. I am learning from my interaction with leaders in tribal colleges in our nation that in their case, it's just part of who they are. It's part of the fabric of the institution that you have a sense of identity, that you respect, that you value, you develop community, and that community inspires you to feel you belong in this place. So it's easy to understand, more difficult to implement. So I think that's the challenge, is how do you take that notion and develop strategies around it that lead to a change in culture. If it's only one or two people or the word of the moment or the poster of the day, that's not creating long-term impact. or changing basically anything other than one or two people at a time, right? So I think it's really important. All of the services that we talked about to lead to people feeling you care and I belong, when you have safe spaces for students, when they see themselves reflected in the institution, when they see, you have all of this information all over the place. Someone was mentioning that the other day, oh, there's a lot of talk about diversity in this institution, but then when you look around and you look at what's posted on, the walls or some of the offices, it doesn't really reflect the diversity that the college talks about. So for students of color, it's like you may say those nice words, but I don't see that reflected around. It doesn't lead me to feel I am welcomed and I belong. I don't see people like me. I don't see people like me on these pictures that you're putting up or your website or whatever. So I think it's just the translation of the concept and the philosophy to what does that look like in your operational decisions and strategies at the college.
So you mentioned Amarillo College and some tribal colleges, all of which I know you've worked with. Can you speak a little bit about some of the outcomes that they have achieved as a result of their work?
Well, for the tribal colleges, I don't have the authority to speak about the colleges. I'm learning from the leaders that I am meeting, because the way they speak about their mission is so, the sense of identity and culture is so interwoven with the mission of the college. So I'm learning from them about what that looks like. I think in other places where people are seeing is if you have all those elements that I just mentioned, it leads to the students staying and persisting. And we know we're not going to have completion and employment and whatever the post-completion outcomes are if the students are not coming and staying and progressing through college. So people are beginning to see the metrics, the outcomes that they measure around student success impacted in a positive way when the students feel this is my place. I was watching some of the videos that Ceci produces, and there was one African-American male, maybe in his 20s, and he says something that really impacted me towards the beginning of the video. He says, "This is the first place that ever said yes to me, that ever said yes to me and said, come in," and he said, helped me understand the importance of getting an education and being here and being supportive, including, he said, how to dress professionally. I mean, there were so many components, but what really impacted me was how he started and said, this is the first place that said yes to me.
Wow, that is extremely impactful, very impactful. So where do community colleges go from here? What's next?
Well, number one, I think, is understanding the business has changed, right? And I have so many conversations with people, leaders in community colleges, and say, there's no going back. There's no sitting around waiting for what, I don't know what, to come back. There's no coming back. So I think understanding what you and I were just saying not too long ago, that the nature of the business has changed, that you are part of an ecosystem, and that you need to invest the energy and the time and the resources in making connections within that ecosystem. Understanding the importance of having a relationship with your K-12 system, for example, or your baccalaureate granting institutions in the case where they exist so your students can transfer. It's one player in a big team of players. I love baseball, so that's what I'm thinking about. Baseball, you cannot have one person playing baseball. You have to have a team, and everyone has an important role to play. I think it's the same thing in the community. So colleges are one player. So you have to invest the time and the resources developing those relationships. And to me, that's critical. Just because you cannot just go knocking on doors and asking for things if you do not have those relationships in place. So people understand the mission, they understand what it is that you champion. They come together for the cause with you. So I think the model is changing. I think quite often about the competition has changed. So in some years back, lanes were clearly defined and community colleges had a role, and that's what you do, and nobody else does that. But right now, many of the elements of the mission of community colleges, everybody else is doing. So you need to think about the competition differently. And that's not because there was a pandemic, that's because it has changed. And community colleges are not the only institutions, we said earlier, struggling for enrollment. Also, historically, community colleges were not as responsive and nimble and as some businesses, for example, would like to see. So people have moved on, and there are other entities now that offer training, that offer non-credit training, that offers short-term certificates. And those are things that in many places were the purview of the community colleges alone. So I think the business model is changed. The need to be more responsive to the community in multiple ways has changed. The competition looks very different today. I don't think that's going to change. So how do you do internal work to develop the capacities and to transform the old ways of doing things at the institutions? Because you can't impose innovative thinking, or even I heard a college president on Saturday speak about the need to be more entrepreneurial. You can't be that if you impose those on old systems that are working very traditionally. So to me, that's the biggest challenge of community colleges, is how do you evolve to the expectations of today and yet not keep your systems in place, because they were designed a long time ago. They were not even designed for the diversity of the students that we want to attract and serve. How do you reconcile that? To me, those are big challenges. There is no going back. And the work today, we just said a lot of things about the need to serve students differently. That's not changing. That's not changing. That did not start with the pandemic. It may have been, greater challenges because of the pandemic, but it didn't start 2 years ago. We've known about the need to serve students differently for years now. So moving forward, how do you bring together the expectations of the community? And by the way, being responsive is actually a survival mechanism for institutions, and then transform internally your systems and capacities so you can deliver those expectations.
Maria, you've given us a lot to think about and some great insights for leaders to consider at their home institutions. Thank you for sharing your experiences and for helping us to explore these critical issues in community colleges.
Thank you. Thank you for the invitation. At minimum, I hope some of the questions are provocative questions so that leaders can think a little differently about the way they serve their communities.
Thanks for joining us on the Future of Education. If you enjoyed this discussion, make sure you subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you like to listen. And please check out our other episodes.